Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you for we don't have a weekly Game of Thrones show to talk about, but we do have a weekly Game of Throws that has now been multiple weeks. A lot of teams in different regions have had some egregious throws, but lately it really seems like Europe and the LEC are delivering drama on the Rift every weekend.
It's a race nobody should be wanting to win at this point. The race for who can throw the hardest, who can throw the most. It's looking like the LEC is putting their name up for consideration if we look back on the past weekend, because top to bottom, you had throws regardless of how you were viewed heading into this weekend. Nobody and no lead was safe within the LEC.
And really, the two biggest ones to look at, let's start with Carmine Corp, because individually this was the worst throw against Giant X. They had a near 9k gold lead before they end up throwing over a quadra kill to Noah on GX for them to get back into this game. And not only is it a quadra kill, it is one at a time, guys TPing in after the fight has already lost. Jackie's gets caught out, Callist gets a little too excited. It's just one after the other, the ants go marching by to give a kill to Noah.
It's one of these situations where the response and how you try to train out of these type of moments is having that recognition in the moment, in that time of saying, we're out of sync, and yes, this one guy just died and now I can maybe get him, and maybe then I trade it off. Taking those risks, taking those chances where it then can start to spiral into something like we saw where you throw away that advantage and you let them back in to an opportunity, to a power position. That's the problem, and that's something I want to see stop for a squad like Carmine Corp. At least for them, the punishment, the payout for this type of mistake, for the throw, isn't one where it costs them the whole series.
Yeah, they still get the win. They moved to 5-1, but still, you're feeling messy about the 5-1 record for Carmine Corp. But Vitality didn't come away with the series win, and they didn't have as big a gold lead against Team Heretics that they throw away, but they do it once, twice, 3 times, basically. You have some ill-advised team fights where they just do the same, bash their head against the wall, try and push things down. Carzy ends up getting caught out a couple of times. This was clear middle of the tier LEC bad.
Surely the second time should have been enough of an answer that, this strategy, this call is not working out. We need to change it up. We need to do something else in this regard. No. Dial it up one more time. This is surely going to be the one. It was not for Vitality. And this has really been, I think, one of the stories that's gone under the radar as far as where things are in the LEC. But Vitality has disappointed. This split out, I think a lot of people, ourselves included, were banking on them being one of the teams to take that time off between the spring and winter and spring, and be sharper, be a better squad, because the underlying numbers weren't all that bad from that winter split. The numbers aren't good for spring, and the results aren't good for spring.
And I feel like they're the team that has the most highlights as a team in games that they lose, because there were great moments. They got a sizable lead against Heretics. They've been getting 2v2 kills in the bot lane, and then they ultimately end up losing the game, where it feels like a long ways away from that first series that we had a little bit of initial hype for Niski and the role swap and the squad. It's been all downhill from there, and they are unfortunately looking like that bottom end of the LEC. And you might not call it a throw, but a surprise in G2 finally getting grounded, brought down to earth. The no longer perfect squad in the LEC at the hands of BDS. Not only did they lose in 0-2 fashion, and they lose basically the exact same way in both games. They must have decided coming into this series, we're going to practice split pushing. It was like a challenge mode. We have to win the game by split pushing.
And I think you're still, going to use some more practice on split pushing and getting its effect really felt out there on Summoner's Rift. And number two, it is that failure to adapt, failure to change within the moment. Whether this was maybe a full-on set forth of, okay, you know what, at the end of the day, if this does end up as a loss, we're sacrificed. This is whatever, we are working on this good or bad scenario. Sure, that's fine. That's one thing. And you can, especially as a power elite team like G2, you've got that luxury where you can maybe take that angle. But I think a lot of people, I don't think that was exactly what was on course for the day. It just seemed very more so just a case of being stubborn in the situation of how you wanted to play, how you wanted to come across in this series, and not finding that answer almost every single time into BDS.
And, you know, credit where credit is due. BDS, absolutely, the strength that we saw from this team last year was engages, finding team fights, finding wombo combos, and more often than not, it was Lebrov who was the guy finding it for them then. But this year, and this series in particular, it was the whole team collectively. 113 had a nice, solid series. This is a squad we've been waiting to kind of reach that contender level in the LEC, and this was definitely the series where they made that statement.
A team that has the pieces to be up in that upper competitive tier of the LEC, but hasn't found a way to crack it just yet. I think this is them starting to get that chisel just in the ceiling, taking a couple little light taps to get it set in before they crash through the rest of the LEC.
And again, a little messiness from KC. G2 drops the series. Fnatic was dominant as usual on the Rift in, yes, an easy matchup against Rogue. But now we're entering the dangerous waters of Fnatic potentially climbing towards the top of the LEC again ahead of playoffs. And that's a scary place to be.
It always feels like the unsettled ocean when Fnatic's at the top of the LEC. G2 feels like calm waters. Everything is still. All these, even Carmine Corp comes through. Maybe it's a nice, you know, it's a nice French, you know, Alp stream rolling on through, nice and crisp. Fnatic takes control. It's that stormy, dark seas that's over the LEC with the just uncomfortable unpredictableness, I think, of them and some of the performances that you can get through. But at the very least for them, yes, it's that check mark. An easy check mark with Rogue this week, but it's a check mark nonetheless when there's not a lot of check marks being given out to the LEC this weekend.
Yeah, it's more some stickers like you tried, participate, like great attempt. You know, that's what a lot of the teams in the LEC were getting this year. If you were handing out fun stickers for having a great time on the Rift, 100% D plus Kia. Taking away the honors this weekend. We didn't have any, you know, marquee matchups over in South Korea matchups today, but we did get D plus aiming, getting denied a pentakill, not once, but twice. Showmaker seemed to feel bad about the first one. I guarantee you, Lucid did not feel bad about stealing the second.
No, there was nothing in that second one. There was no hesitation. There was no consideration. It was absolutely do or die for that one. Lucid taking it himself. Showmaker, a little bit more the veteran savviness of knowing maybe not to take one of these ones. It's a bit of a whoopsie in that. But yes, DK rolls on through. Very controlled, very much the power that you wanted to see from them. And again, in a weekend where there weren't really any of these head-to-heads, not any big movers and shakers of Gen G, T1, Hanwha Life, Gen G, whatever you want to cross it off of that mixture. You didn't get it. So taking care of business, looking good while you're doing it gets you those marks if you are D plus Key.
And we know they're fully unlocked when Showmaker is laughing, when the team is having a good time on the Rift. So good times for D+, even though it's, again, an easier matchup against DRX for them. We did have that bottom of the table matchup in the LCK, and this was a classic matchup of not looking like you're watching Korean League of Legends. KT versus the DN Freaks. KT, again, it's Doc Dom, Peter coming into the lineup starting for them, and this ending is absolutely, I'm going to call it abysmal. You have the Freaks trying to close it out. There's a Nexus defense from KT that gets so close, and then you have casting basically int on the Galio, and then he ends up TPing and being the one to win the game. I can't believe this is tier 1 LCK.
It felt like taking the expired Chinese food takeout from the LPL, throwing it into some stew that's been brewed in some ugly cauldron over in the LEC, and this is the splash it out on the LTA table, and here's what you get to eat.
It's the ranch sauce that's thrown in from the LTA on top.
which I think a lot of us can agree, not exactly the cuisine we've been served from the LCK so often, or especially the premier dishes from the region. But you got to go through the slop sometimes. That is exactly what this matchup was. Again, still though, I'm screaming, I'm shouting, somebody get BDD. Someone get this man out of this situation. Someone parachute in and save him, join him, whatever it's got to take, because he is still contributing, still has those skills and determination to be one of the best within the intense competitive region of the LCK. And he's just left to flounder in what is the spaghetti mess of this matchup.
Yeah, it feels like, again, like this guy's been around for so long. It's another year that feels like he is elite, like top 4 mid lane in the LCK, near his prime. That looks like it's going to be wasted unless there's some sweeping changes across KT roster heading into the summer split, which seems unlikely at this point. But at the very least, they pick up another series and keep the Freaks winless on the year, which is a very small win for KT at this point. It was anything but small wins for the first couple of days in Super Week action over in the LTA. We were hyping up Cloud9, we were hyping up Loki, but they beat up on the bottom feeders last week. Well, this week they kick things off against Team Liquid and Cloud9, or they are Cloud9 against FlyQuest. And they do the exact same thing. They have dominant wins on the Rift, and Loki is looking like the best mid laner in the LTA right now. This man is driving circles on the Rift Herald, knocking out multiple people, and then doing a delayed shuffle onto 4. That was one of the cleanest plays of the year in the LTA.
Hey man, if it was low-level value meal at McDonald's type eating for Cloud9 in last week, this is the surf and turf, steak and lobster of the LTA, Team Liquid and FlyQuest, and the way that Cloud9, and especially as you highlighted, Loki in the mid lane, were able to dismantle both of these teams and come away as a clear victor on the day, does shake things up in the LTA, does make that big change at the top, having Cloud9 get these triumphs over these top tier teams within the LTA.
And again, it really hasn't taken very long. I know you can talk about the entire winter split, but these solo laners now in tandem with Blabber, but especially Thanatos and Loki, they look unmatched in the LTA, aside from maybe a spicy pick out of Bwipo in that top side, but they are just absolutely running laps around the rest of the solo laners in the LTA right now, and it's felt like, at least this week, Sven was just kind of having a good time, a joyride as a passenger princess.
And I'm telling you, this is a genius thing and one of the dreams for Cloud9 to have it come through like this, because this is how you wanted it to work out, where you have guys like Thanatos, Loki come in, start to, find and deliver on that immense potential that they have within the solo lanes to be those engines that drive you and push you and everything else. But you need to have stability. There needs to be structure within the team, and having veterans like Sven and Vulcan down as that bottom lane duo and Blabber in the jungle, having that, auxiliary effect on what is the progression of Thanatos and specifically Loki in the mid lane this past week. This is it. This is what you wanted for Cloud9, and you are starting to see the acceleration, starting to see the progression of this team keep building on their potential. Extremely excited about this one. It's not all done and dusted or whatever in the LTA. We still got Monday Super Week games going on, but so far for Cloud9, it is a mega smash weekend.
And good signs again, because it felt like FlyQuest was not really being tested in their first couple of matches. This is best of ones again. Still one more day of best of ones. We need a best of 3 bare minimum between C9 and FlyQuest, but now really separating themselves as those top 2. We also had 100 Thieves matching up against Leon Gaming. 100 Thieves struggled a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of it in their first week, and they needed some miracles out of Quid Silas to steal them that game. Second game was much better out of them, but Leon Gaming is still a squad that could crack into that top 4, and I think that was proven this weekend.
They provide enough of that pushback, and I think, again, very much so a clear difference between them and the rest of the remaining teams in the LTA. As you look down, you know, maybe you can make a case. Heck, you know, maybe a couple extra bucks from Ludwig might make it an easier case. You could talk about Shopify maybe having a chance to climb up and challenge. But right now, they're clearly above those bottom three in the LTA. And clearly, given this matchup against 100 Thieves, they're knocking right up on 100 Thieves' door to try and usurp them and take that next spot up within the LTA.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely, even with the win for 100 Thieves, it's more of the same. There's still question marks. I know it was a couple of Jace games out of Sniper where he had like a 5K gold lead in one of these matchups individually, which is great, but it still very much is Quid that is the engine, the driver, the assistant, pretty much every role that's possible is him for 100 Thieves.
Yeah, and I will say at the very least with those Jace games for Sniper, number one, you are getting one check mark for getting those advantages and building it up and everything else. You're missing the check mark towards the mid to late game part of it where you are then utilizing that advantage that you have built upon and really setting your team up, even more so showing what type of power you have built for yourself. I didn't think that transition was maybe as smooth as you would like it to be, given the advantages he was able to earn for himself.
But I'll tell you, patterns now we're seeing in the LTA is now Cloud9 and 100 Thieves, or not, Cloud9 and FlyQuest drifting into a kind of echelon tier of their own. Team Liquid has definitely looked shaky to start things off in spring, and you're lumping them more hanging out with 100 Thieves and Lion Gaming.
You're starting to look at that slice of cheese at the top of the LTA, and you're seeing the Cloud9, you're seeing the FlyQuest wedge, and then you're starting to look at Team Liquid and 100 Thieves as the rest of this top four makeup of the cheese. You're seeing some mold, and that ain't the good type of stinky cheese mold. No. It is the one that you got to cut it off, or else your tum-tum's going to be yucky city. So we got to work through this one in the LTA, but at the very least, nice to see that separation from Cloud9 on building on what we thought we saw last weekend, and still with FlyQuest hanging in that territory of that top tier.
There's serious separation or new era type stuff over in the LPL that's happening, because this ain't BLG's kingdom or world that we're living in anymore after another fresh loss to top eSports. This was a Kanavi diff across the board. First, he's getting 3-man ultis on the Skarner, and then he's getting solo kills on Bin's Jax as Pantheon.
And keep track of this. I think this is now the third, maybe it's only two, but I'm thinking this is the third week in a row that we're talking about what Kanavi, is able to do in the jungle for top esports, and how he changes the very structure of a series with these performances, dialing it up. Before we've had the Nefiri be it up. Now it's the Skarner, dialing up something completely different for the top esports squad, but finding the angles, finding these big ultimates, the big impales, and making it happen for the rest of the squad to set them all up. Yes, it's a different world in the LPL right now, seeing a squad like BLG be able to be taken advantage of in this type of way.
I really feel like BLG just kind of got complacent or used to. It felt like all of last year they could just kind of hands diff. We could just out team fight you. Our macro is kind of irrelevant. We're just going to completely either steamroll through the laning phase or just outmaneuver you in team fights, because mechanically our teams are better. But it feels like the rest of the LPL, anyone's legend, top esports, even IG and JDG on a good day have kind of upped their game, and BLG can't get away with that against them.
It just makes me think back to the winter split when there was an upset loss to Thunder Talk Gaming, and we had Bin coming out and basically saying, yeah, I did no video review, no real preparation for this one heading into it. And it's one where you go, well, I hope it was a mistranslation, or maybe it's a situation of, really underestimating a squad like Thunder Talk. But if that is the level of preparation or focus that was going into it, makes sense to see them slip up and lose ground to teams that are putting in that homework, putting in that extra effort, especially knowing what they were chasing in the previous highs that BLG was able to hit for the region. I think it absolutely is a little bit of a, somewhat of a, no pity type of situation for not taking it as seriously, not working as hard as these other teams. But then the other one that you do have a little bit of leniency going, yep, I think this is the unfair rewards of the success that you have had to push your region, push the other teams, having to go further and further, better and better in order to top you.
And, one of those squads that just talked about stepping into the fill the shoes of BLG was JDG. Unfortunately, it was a rough weekend for the boys. You kicked things off with one of the most insane snatching defeat from the jaws of victory against Invictus Gaming in Game 3, and then you followed that up by getting smashed 13-1 in dominant fashion at the hands of Weibo, where it felt like they just rolled over, and all of a sudden, what do we think about JDG?
Well, flat out, the IG one, I really need someone more intelligent, more knowledgeable about the game to do a full breakdown on that one, because it's still, I can watch it back at half speed, and I'm still missing exactly the decision-making of how you lose from the position that you're in just shortly before the collapse of the game, pretty much, for this one. That one is puzzling to me. But yes, this was a rough one for JDG. I think still when you look at that lineup, you look at the team and what they're capable of ahead of them still in the LPL. Not fully ready to sell out on them, but this certainly was a black eye of a weekend.
It feels like, again, it's too much heavy lifting that's on the back of Pace. That IG series was one of the most incredible series from an AD carry in the LPL this year, and Pace ends up losing that series. And then here against Weibo, it's if all the eggs are in the Pace basket, Weibo does everything to catch him out, and the team fight is just lost. I will say Weibo has leveled up lately. Irha comes in as the starting support, and they have looked infinitely better, so maybe they're the next ones up to step into that contender tier in the LPL.
Oh, man. There's got to be a crazier word. Someone break out the dictionary, the thesaurus, whatever it is. Find one for better, because, yes, there has to be a more extravagant way to describe the change for Weibo Gaming with Erha stepping in, and what that change was, not just for the bottom lane, I think for the rest of the team and their mindset and what some of these plays were they were able to pull off in this series. So yes, Weibo skyrocketing actually up the rest of the LPL and where you consider them in their consideration. But returning to that talk about JDG, yes, Pays doing a lot of that work, respect to do a lot of the heavy lifting. You have to still be able to look at the rest of this lineup and find other contributors, find other avenues to get advantages within the game where it doesn't just simply boil down to, is Pays able to be him?
Yeah, you're always going to need multiple win cons if you want to step in through that shadow of BLG within the LPL. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolute beauties. Thanks for hanging out as always. We will catch you on that flippity flip.